Interdisciplinary course.
Yeah.
And
Great.
Megan, the floor is yours.
Can you hear us or hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. So yes, hi, I'm Robbie Pittis-Baker. I'm a PhD student here in Human Factors and Ergonomics, and this is my colleague Megan Clarke, who is a master's student in apparel studies. We both come from the Wearable Technology Lab over on the beautiful St. Paul campus. And basically, our lab directors, Dr. Brad Holshoe and Dr. Lucy Dunn, tasked us with creating a lab component to a lecture course they have on wearable technology. So basically, starting off, we came up with sort of 3 key goals. And I think one is de-emphasizing perfection and promoting exploration. At the end of the day, wearable technology means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And there's a lot of different fields that can get involved. And so we want to make sure sometimes you're the expert, sometimes you're the novice, and making sure people feel comfortable in those spaces in between. Secondly, emphasizing the importance of wearability and device development. I think, especially because both of us come from an apparel design background before where we are now, making sure wearable technology is actually wearable is something that people don't always think about. And so emphasizing that is just something we want to blend through the whole entire course. And then finally, give multidisciplinary students a chance to interact and blend their interests. So this class is really meant to, reach across the university. So from people in our home base in the College of Design to people in engineering, or really anyone who wants to take a wearable technology course. So there's no major requirements or anything like that, as long as you're interested and are ready to go. So the broad topics with wearable technology, they can cover consumer goods, industry, government, military, requires a lot of STEM knowledge, working in tandem with traditional design and apparel skills. And really, it highlights the need to work across disciplines, because at the end of the day, you're melding a lot of different fields that don't usually get along very well. But that's also the fun part, because you get to challenge each other, come up with new ideas, and develop new things. So initial ideation, basically, developing a class, especially as students who have never actually developed a class before, is kind of hard. And so we started off just thinking about what we as students would want, what would work, and what would be fun. Because at the end of the day, we both had at that point taken the lecture course. The lecture portion of this sort of set of classes launched sort of when we were all still at home taking Zoom classes. And so once classes were more offered in person, they wanted to bring in the lab component. But basically trying to think through that and what type of class we'd want to see. So we did a lot of mind mapping. You can just sort of see that picture, just that idea of what do we want, what's possible, but then, sort of culling it down and thinking about, okay, we have about 14 weeks to get this done, what's manageable, what's feasible, what will keep our professors from going crazy when they actually have to teach it to people. So as I said, you've got to condense a variety of topics because we intersect a lot of different fields. It can be purely very garment-based, it can be medical, it can be a lot of different things. And so you really got to, bring it into as simple as it can be. And I think one of the biggest challenges for us is just because we do come from that apparel background, that's what we lead with. We think about patterning a garment, sewing it together, materials, like what materials you need for that garment and how it interacts with the body. And while those are all wonderful and important things, we have to say, okay, well, there's people who are interested in computer science or engineering who aren't necessarily, or who have skills and who have interests that need to be met by this course as well. In the College of Design, we actually run a lot of summer programs for middle school and high school students, namely Step Up program and style engineers. And so basically taking some inspiration from some of the activities there, because they do a lot of fun, very light STEM projects for younger kids. And just so taking that, but upgrading it obviously for a college level audience. So when it came to structuring it, I'll briefly cover kind of the way we've ended up structuring the course. So starting off, obviously, aside from introducing, we just dive right in with circuits, Arduino, just sort of the most basic of basic. For some people, it's very remedial, but for some people, it's very challenging. And I think that's the kind of thing where week after week, that's the kind of idea where you'll have a week where you're like, oh man, this is something I did freshman year. This is so easy. Why am I even doing this? And then the next week, going to be like, oh my goodness, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. Because we moved directly from circuits and Arduino all the way across the universe to pattern making and sewing. And those are very different skills. They require very different programs, very different materials, and so on. And so a big shift there. But then we combine those two things together. So you have a basic understanding of electricity and circuits and all those kinds of things. And you have a basic understanding of how do we put something on the body. And we work through just different forms of sensing. So mechanical sensing, biometric sensing, into actuation, sort of talking about, again, assisting and haptics. And then finally moving into more broader topics. So wearability and usability, which are basically as broad a terms as like comfort, but essentially cover a lot. E-textile fabrication, sort of the most blended you can get between sort of technical and soft goods development. And then finally, activity recognition, getting more into heavy data analysis, and then obviously moving into a final project, which is basically get together in a team and make what you want to make as a group.
Yeah, and now I'll take over here. So as I am one of the students who is actually taking the lab practicum instead of Robbie as well. So I have a little more insight on how the class has been in action. So when we developed the lessons, we wanted to make sure we matched competencies between students. So everyone was kind of an expert for a day. So we looked into collaborators and other student resources that are available on campus, as well as out in the community, that have like maker spaces or materials that are useful for these types of products. And we also wanted to make sure that if whatever project that we had or lab activity that we put out there, it was something that could be accessible to all students regardless of their backgrounds. So we created a template to keep labs feeling connected that is then drawn through each week, even when the topics are completely distinct. There's always a way to either tie it back to the lecture, of which is a required component for you to have taken part of for this semester. And then also making sure that each week sort of feels fresh and new. There we go. So one of the most important things that we settled on was sort of making sure that both design and STEM disciplines have equal footing in this class, because in order to create like a good wearable device once you're out in the field is being able to take everybody's sort of skills, dumping them in, winnowing them out, and creating the best sort of product you can with the knowledge that you have. So the course was, as we mentioned, designed for an accessible range of backgrounds. We have people from the computer sciences, mechanical and electrical engineering, people from the apparel studies programs, as well as individuals from the advanced wearables certificate program as well. Students take a very active part in the learning and mentoring. So some weeks you'll have somebody who has a greater knowledge base in Arduino paired with somebody who has a knowledge base in pattern making, and you work together to teach each other concepts, as well as put together the very rudimentary prototypes and devices that we develop through the lab work. And students are also encouraged to really explore skills outside their domain. Each week there is a like take home homework element where you are encouraged to go out, maybe find some tutorials on the internet, look up things that you've never done before and incorporate them into your assignment. For example, the image that I have here is we did a pattern making exercise in Clo 3D, which is a computer aided design software. So we had people who learned traditional draping just that day, and then we kicked them all the way into computer aided design as well. And the same happened when we worked with Arduino. We had them run the very rudimentary blink test, and then we had them go out and work on any other projects. I believe I did some sort of strain gauge thing, and I learned the importance of resistors that day. And then finally, so here is some images of our course in action. So one unique thing that we did at the beginning of the semester is we had lab partners paired via a skills assessment. So there was a little kind of like quiz that you would take that sort of ranked your comfortable or your levels of comfort with different skill sets. So that's everything from basic coding to circuit making to pattern making and sewing, just to get an idea of where everybody's at. And then pairing lab partners, swapping out every once in a while, so you kind of meet other people in your class to make sure that everyone is sort of on decent footing there. So we really paired that novice and expert together. And then each lab builds on the previous one. So for example, our first one was Intro to Arduino and Circuits. That moved then to more complex ones, and that moved to Apparel, which then moved to putting circuits on Apparel on the body. And then open-ended homework is there to refine skill and pursue interests. As Robbie said, it was very much a wet feet approach and just getting people to think of an exploration mindset rather than a perfection mindset.
You're close to your time limit.
Yep. So here is one last image of some of the in-class lab activities. So you can see wearability as we're kind of whittling down pieces to put on the body to see like, how can you move when you put like a hard component on a soft good, and what does that range of motion look like? And then also the other image is from our haptics lab, where we had to learn how to send messages to each other via haptic motors, which was really an interesting and fun challenge, especially for me, who has never done anything like that before. And that is it for us. So thank you for listening. And do you have any questions for us?
All right, are there any questions for Megan and Robbie?
I have one. Can you remind me, where does this fit? In particular, this is not part of the major. Is this basically a service course, standalone course, the one and only thing that some students might ever encounter in apparel design?
So, well, it is part of the certificate course for wearable technology, which I forgot about because it just got introduced. So there is like a
Yes.
certificate that's being offered through the College of Design. But currently it's kind of open-ended. I believe it funnels into the human factors major, and I believe it factors maybe into apparel studies.
I know in the product development track, especially which
Yes.
I'm in, it's offered as a elective that you can do to sort of focus your interest area depending on your thesis direction. So it's like, I took this class in particular because I'm going to need to know how to do some of these things. So it was interesting to me to join. But it is, I think, currently offered to anyone provided they're in, I don't know if you actually have to have a specific major. That's a good question.
I don't believe so, or at the very least, you could email Brad and Lucy and they'd be able to let you in, which I realize that if you are interested, it is DES 5901 and 5902. So DES for design, 5901 and 5902. Probably should mention that.
Last call for questions. All right, thank you, Megan and Robbie.
Thank you.
Turn off that recording. Our next speaker is in the room.